The Northumberland Straight. Blue-grey water stretching between the shores of Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Calm at times, violent at others, and always watched by those who live along its edge. For more than 200 years, something unusual has been reported there. At dusk, or just before dawn, or on nights when the air hangs heavy on the water, mariners and shore watchers have claimed to see a ship. Not just any ship, but a tall-masted sailing vessel, fully rigged, moving steadily across the strait. And it's on fire. Flames rise from its deck and sails, bright enough to be seen from miles away. Yet there is no smoke, no sound, and no sign of distress. The ship does not burn down. It does not sink. Instead, it sails on, glowing against the dark water, before vanishing without a trace. Witnesses have described the sight with fear, awe, and disbelief. Some tried to row out towards it, only to watch it disappear before they could reach open water. Others saw it from the shore, convinced they were witnessing a shipwreck that never happened. Over time, the stories spread across coastal communities and beyond, passed down through generations. Some came to call it the phantom ship of the Northumberland Strait. Others believed it was an omen, a warning, or a message from the sea itself. Tonight, we open the file on one of Atlantic Canada's most enduring maritime mysteries. To understand this story, we have to begin with place. The Northumberland Strait is a narrow channel of the Atlantic Ocean in eastern Canada. It runs between the mainland shores of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia on one side, and Prince Edward Island on the other. At its narrowest points, the land feels close. At its widest, the water opens into a long, uncertain stretch that has carried ships for centuries. This is not a quiet sea. Weather here can change without warning. Calm water can turn rough in a matter of hours. Fog rolls in from nowhere, swallowing the horizon. Winds rise from the northeast, pushing cold air and heavy clouds across the strait. For sailors, fishermen, and coastal communities, these conditions were not just inconvenient. They were dangerous. For generations, people have depended on these waters for work and survival. In summer, fishing boats head out at first light, setting lines and hauling traps. In winter, ice forms and drifts south, grinding against itself as it moves with the current. Even from shore, the strait demands respect. Folklore tells us that the ghost ship appears under very specific conditions. Witnesses say it shows itself when the northeast wind begins to blow, when the tide is slack, and when the boundary between sea and sky become hard to distinguish. The air feels heavy, sound carries strangely, and just as the horizon starts to blur, the ship appears, sailing where no ship should be. It is in this uneasy space between calm and storm that the legend takes shape. The earliest recorded printed sightings of the phantom ship date back more than 200 years. One of the most important documented sources comes from the ghostly encounters of the Northumberland kind, transcribed from the Island magazine, Spring-Summer of 1978, written by William B. Hamilton. While the article itself was published in the 20th century, it draws from much older oral histories and early printed records that show the story was already deeply rooted in maritime tradition. Across these accounts, the details remain remarkably consistent. Witnesses describe a large sailing vessel, usually with 3 or 4 masts, moving steadily across the water. Its sails are often described as white, standing out sharply against the dark horizon. According to folklore researcher Virginia Chandler, the ship was said to be engulfed from bow to stern in the fire, yet it showed no signs of collapsing, sinking, or sending out distress signals. The flames burned intensely, but without smoke or sound. One of the most frequently repeated accounts dates back around the year 1900. Sailors in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, reportedly spotted the burning vessel offshore. Believing the ship was in trouble, they launched a small rowboat and set out to reach it. This version of the story appears in later maritime folklore summaries, including accounts preserved through regional history, sources such as Fox Harbor. A large three-masted sailing vessel ablaze from bow to stern. A group of men boarded a small boat and rowed towards the flaming ship. While they were still some distance from the craft, it disappeared into the mist. As the decades passed, sightings continued to be reported. From Burnt Point on Prince Edward Island to Tatamagouche Bay in Nova Scotia, the legend spread along the coast, later documented in folklore publications like Enchanted Living magazine. The details rarely change. The ship appears, it burns, and before anyone can reach it, it vanishes, leaving behind only the dark water and the certainty that something was seen, even if it could never be explained. So, what exactly do people say they see? According to the multiple coastal reports, including accounts preserved through Fox Harbor sources, witnesses consistently describe a tall sailing ship with 3 or 4 masts. Its white sails are often the first thing noticed, standing out against the dark water and sky. Then there is the fire. In some sightings, the ship appears fully ablaze, the flames running through the rigging and along the decks. In others, the vessel itself seems to glow, as though lit from within rather than burning in the usual sense. Later summaries, including those collected through general folklore records, note that the fire produces little to no smoke, adding to the sense that something about the scene is wrong. Some of the most unsettling details involve the movement of the ship itself. A small number of reports mention figures climbing the rigging or standing on the deck. One account even references the presence of both people and dogs, briefly visible in the firelight before fading from view. The ship is also described as moving quickly, often cutting across the water in a way that does not match the wind or tide. Several witnesses note that it seems to travel towards the northeast wind rather than away from it. And finally, there's the disappearance. When boats turn towards it or when watchers strain to get a clearer look, the ship simply vanishes into fog or darkness. Some of the most detailed descriptions come from written eyewitness accounts preserved in regional folklore archives. The following is a quote from an eyewitness published in Ghostly Encounters of the Northumberland kind. About 7 p.m. on January evening, my attention was drawn to a ball of fire out on the strait, about 10 miles to the right of Pictou Island. It was definitely not a lighthouse, and the light, in the shape of a half moon, was dark red in color. These repeated details, reported by different people across different decades, make it difficult to dismiss the sightings as simple misinterpretations of light or weather alone. Like all legends, the ghost ship has many origin stories, each adding a layer to the mystery. Some say it's the spirit of the John Craig Light, a ship lost off Shippagan Island, its crew claimed by the sea. Others point to Colbum, which went down in a storm in 1838, or to an immigrant vessel bound for Scotland that simply never arrived, swallowed by the strait and forgotten by history. Each story attempts to explain the same strange phenomenon, giving faces and names to a ship that may never have had either. Then there are the wilder tales told in local folklore. Pirate ships cursed for their crimes, privateers who disappeared with treasure, or simple accidents, such as fires breaking out below deck and setting the vessel ablaze. Across coastal communities, the stories vary in detail, but share a common thread. A ship appears in the water, engulfed in fire, and vanishes before it can be reached. But none of these origins are confirmed. There's no record of a ship officially lost on the night of a reported sighting, no logbooks to verify its crew or cargo. The name of the ship, its nationality, its ultimate fate, all remain unknown. And that perhaps is why the legend has endured for more than 2 centuries. The mystery is complete because the answers are missing. With no definitive history, no explanation, and no proof beyond eyewitness accounts, the phantom ship continues to sail in the imagination of those who watch the Northumberland Straight, leaving only fire on the horizon and questions that refuse to be answered. Of course, folklore doesn't stop science from asking questions. Over the years, researchers and scholars have offered several possible explanations for the sightings of the phantom ship, trying to reconcile legend with natural phenomena. One possibility is St. Elmo's fire, a luminous electrical discharge that occurs from pointed objects during stormy electrical charged air-sea conditions. Sailors in the age of tall ships were well aware of it, and some scholars suggest that what witnesses described as flames on the Phantom ship could have been this strange, glowing phenomenon, appearing to cling to the masts and rigging of a distant vessel. Another explanation comes from optical physics. The Fata Morgana, a complex form of mirage. When warm air layers sit over cooler water, light bends in unusual ways, creating images that appear to float above the horizon. Under the right conditions, this could make ordinary ships, coastal lights, or even reflections of clouds appear elongated, distorted, or glowing, producing the illusion of a burning vessel sailing across the strait. Virginia Chandler notes that these atmospheric distortions are well documented in maritime folklore around the world, often linked to mysterious ships or floating cities. Simpler explanations are also possible. Mist, darkness, reflections on the water, or misidentified vessels or shore lights may account for some sightings. A fishing boat seen from a distance at dusk could look like a tall-masted ship in flames, especially if the light is refracted or partially obscured. But despite all these theories, no definitive answer has ever been confirmed. The ghost ship has become a part of maritime culture, leaving its mark on music, memory, and everyday life. Folk songs, like Tales of the Phantom Ship by Lenny Gallant, imagine the blazing vessel moving silently across the Northumberland Strait, capturing both fear and wonder. Music keeps the story alive, letting listeners far from the water feel its mystery. The legend also shapes tourism and local lore. Places like Burnt Point on Prince Edward Island and Tittamegush Bay in Nova Scotia are tied to the sightings, stories passed down through generations and the shared memory of coastal communities. Visitors walk these shores hoping for a glimpse of the ship or simply to connect with its story. Even national recognition celebrates the Phantom ship. In 2010, Canada Post issued a stamp commemorating the legend, marking it as a piece of Canadian heritage. For many, this isn't just a ghost story for entertainment, it's heritage. Sightings of the ghost ship continue well into the 21st century. One notable report comes from a 17-year-old named Mathieu Giguère, who claims to see the ship in Tittamegush Bay in November of 2010. According to his account, it was a bright white and gold ship, glowing across the water in a way that didn't match any normal vessel. He watched it from the shore for several minutes before it vanished into the mist. Another modern witness described the experience in similar terms. I watched the ship moving across the water, all glowing and bright, and before I could even blink, it was gone. Even skeptics admit that the vision can be startling. The night sky, dark horizon, and swirling mist can make shapes appear almost impossible. Yet, in this case, Mathieu's sighting matches many historical accounts: multiple masts, glowing sails, and sudden disappearance. Other modern reports follow the same pattern. Melvin Longuy said he saw the ship one evening from Tittamegush Mountain. He described it moving swiftly across the water, then disappearing before he could reach it. When we compare 21st century sightings with reports from the early 1900s, the pattern is clear. Across decades and generations, observers consistently describe the same strange phenomenon: a blazing ship appearing, moving, and vanishing without explanation. These modern accounts show that the Phantom ship is not just a story from the past. It's a living legend, witnessed by new eyes, and still haunting the waters of Northumberland Strait more than 2 centuries later. Why does this story matter? What is the value of a Phantom ship that may never have existed? It speaks to our relationship with the sea. The Northumberland Strait has always been a place of work, danger, and awe. Sailors and coastal communities have learned to respect its sudden storms, shifting ice, and hidden currents. A ship that appears glowing and impossible across the water reminds us of the unknown depths and the power of nature that we cannot fully control. It shows how communities interpret what cannot be explained. Across generations, people have given meaning to the Phantom ship. Some see it as a warning, others as spiritual omen, a message from the water, or a reminder of the lives lost at sea. Folklore provides a framework to make sense of uncertainty, and the Phantom ship is a story that binds communities together through shared experience, conversation, and memory. And finally, it reminds us that some mysteries are stronger when they remain unsolved. Not Every story needs an answer. Sometimes the fascination is in the watching, the wondering, and the telling. From mist-shrouded nights to storm-swept dawns, the ghost ship of the Northumberland Straight continues to sail in human memory. If you ever stand on the shore of Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, just before or after a storm, look out across the water. Watch for a tall ship, white sails blazing in the night. And, if you see it, perhaps it's the sea sending a warning, telling a story, or simply reminding us of the unknown. I'm Haley Kristen, and this has been Memory Archive. If you ever own sightings or stories to add to the archive, send them our way at memoryarchivestories@gmail.com. Until next time, keep a weather eye on the horizon.